Okay, so we're back. One thing I did in between videos was I just quickly went and smoothed the hair and did a little bit of like small refinements in the placement of the verts and things like that with the Quadro Relax tool. Really, so I think we're doing pretty good on this. I think from this point on, we're going to move in the direction of just wrapping up the rest of the body. I think that probably the most complex specific part that we have left is just the hand, but we'll have a pretty good way of tackling that. So I'm not too worried about that. So like I said before, the character is not 100% like aligned symmetrically. So what we're gonna do is I'm going to model this stuff sort of generally with one side in mind, and I'm going to make whatever deviations or adjustments that I have to so that it works on both sides. But basically, I think that we will be pretty okay. I just need to make an accounting for the fact that like the line right in the middle of her chest is pretty much aligned with the grid, but then her pelvis area is a little bit off to the side. So fortunately, because we're doing this stuff in segments, we're going to basically have a pretty easy time getting all these pieces set up. So let's go ahead and I'm going to start with like the basic torso area because that's usually a pretty easy thing to work with. Because torsos are usually going to be derived from kind of a cube shape. So I can start with some kind of like a basic cube dimension here. I'm going to go ahead and add one division, or add one division not in the height but in the width in this case, because of where I started creating it, so that I have something down the center. And I'm roughly going to position this so that the cube is close to the overall shape of her body. And I'm going to assign the character material, character base mat. I want to go to the attribute editor, make sure I've got some transparency in there. And we're going to watch out for a few different things because we want to make sure that we're actually positioning this in such a way that we can attach all the relevant pieces to this form. So let's see. I think now that I've finished with the head, I might actually rotate the body very slightly, just so that I can get a better idea of what's going on here. So I'm going to hold down the E key and turn off discrete rotate. I'm going to hit the insert key really quick. I'm going to move it to right around here. And I'm going to see if I can get this so that it's still tiny bit more aligned. Yeah. Okay. And so then that way, when I'm working on this, I feel like a little bit more confident that I will be able to match that, because it looks like now we have the line right down the middle, all the way through to her clavicle and through her head. And that way I can just kind of not pay attention to the other side, and it should be okay. So for the most part, I just have to make sure that this side piece is also actually aligned with that. So hopefully that'll be okay. And if we have some trouble with it, we'll be fine. But actually, that was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I thought that was going to be way more difficult. So okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click, select face. I'm going to delete all this half. I also want to make sure my soft selection is turned off. And then because I know that the pivot is directly in the center because I made that edge with the divisions there, I can go ahead and type in 0 and X and make sure that those are positioned exactly where they need to be. And so then the first thing I usually do when I'm sort of planning out the shape of a character like this is I kind of decide roughly where my hips are going to be. And so in this case, the character looks like it really has kind of like wider hips, and it might be okay to just sort of leave it like this. But I think that like just because I want to make sure that this is usually the kind of thing that you want to shoot for, I'm going to actually basically make it so that the hips are basically going to slant upward, because that usually works best for the long term for animation. So I'm going to go ahead and then make another edge loop. And this, for right now, I'm not going to actually use edge loops with insert with edge flow because I don't want to make changes to that center section. So I'm probably going to go to right around there. And let's see, because the hip bone, yeah, usually goes maybe like somewhere right around here. So I'm going to add another edge loop in that vein. And yeah, so then we have something roughly like that we can work with for the shape of the basic body form. And then we want to make sure we take a look at this in the side view and have a general idea of what's happening there. I think maybe this is I think it's mostly aligned correctly. So, and then I can grab the pelvis here and adjust that a bit. So there's a few components to getting this ready for attaching the legs. One of them is we need to make sure that we have kind of the posterior area. So I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of divisions that I know are going to be necessary based on what we have here. And then I'm going to slide these verts out to roughly match those areas. All right. And okay, there we go. And so, and then when it comes to doing the dimension of this, I think I'm going to focus more on kind of like making this generalized in a 2D way, and then we'll go in and add some softening and smoothing as we go. But okay, so let's then we also need to add an edge loop right under the breast area so that we can place a little bit more tapering in the back. And we've got to be mindful that part of this is actually going to be resulting from the shape of the jacket, and so we have to kind of interpret what the shape is relative to that. So let's see. Okay, so all right, so there is a decent deviation here, I think, in the two perspectives. So I got to make sure that that's something we account for while we're doing this. So in general, let's see. We want to make sure that we have a little bit of additional shape to work with to contour the breast. I don't. It's always kind of awkward, like discussing this into like how how clinical do I get when I describe it, but yeah, I mean, I think that basically for the most part that's kind of what we're going for. So we need a basic shape. Then we can start adding in some contours to make this fit more organically. So I can go into insert edge loop, insert with edge flow, and then I can make some of the subtle variations. It looks like that's a bit extreme, so we're gonna have to gonna have to tweak that because it looks like it inserted the edge flow outward. So I'm gonna grab that, scale that back in, and I have to kind of decide, I guess, which angle I focus on, the front or the side. And okay. And then basically what we're gonna have to do from here, let's see, I want to make sure that we have enough to work with, but we've got to make sure that it's following the general contour. So I think what we should, actually that's probably a little too extreme, so I'm going to go ahead and lift this up, right click, select face. I'm going to extrude the face there. Then we can use this to work with the remaining parts of the torso. And we're going to go in the direction of merging into this so that the neck and everything logically follows. So, but since we're starting to add in some divisions here, why don't we add one going this axis as well, roughly in the middle, and then we can start taking some of these verts or edges, whichever one you prefer to select, and we can start shifting them a little bit in so that it creates more of the contour of the form. And I know that when you're looking at somebody's rear, that they're going to be, let's see, we can slide this back a bit so we can look at it. It's going to be a little bit larger in the back than it is in the front. Okay, so basic kind of pass at that for right now. So we've got the core idea of the shape coming together. Looks like we may need to adjust the verts a bit here because it looks like we have some faces that we don't want on the inside here. So I want to get rid of that one and that one. We also want to make sure that the verts are still aligned with the center of the grid. So I'm going to type in 0 for X. Type in 0 for X for that. Also make sure we get this one here. Type in 0 for X on that one as well. And you can see, obviously, we got to tweak the sort of shoulder shape a bit. So at this point, we kind of have to make a decision about where we're going to go with transitioning the collar, the neckline, and so usually what I prefer to do is just basically make it that we have a separate head unit and a separate body unit, and that we just make those roughly match up, but they don't need to be exactly identical. So we'll just basically go about the process of adding in details and subtly dividing it until we get to where we want. But let's focus first on just getting kind of the basic form knocked out, and then once we've got that all in there, we can expand on it for the remainder. So okay, so I've got like kind of a basic shape here for right now. Let's go ahead and actually just do the symmetry. So I'm going to go to Edit, Duplicate Special, and then I can see actually there's a vert that I need to move over to the center. So type in the 0 there. Okay, so I've got my basic simple torso shape. But let's go ahead and go about making the legs and the arms. These are actually more straightforward to do. because they're not connecting multiple parts on multiple sides. And actually, we can often get pretty far by doing those with a cylinder. So if I, for example, were to just look in the side view here, I can make like a cylinder to start out with. I want to decide how many subdivisions I want to have. So I'm going to go to, let's see, if I go to something like 12, I think actually it's usually a good idea to do less rather than more, because you can always change it later on. So I'm actually going to go down to 6, and I know that we can add subdivisions as we need to. So I'm going to right click on this one, select assign existing material, character base mat. And then what I'm going to do is basically I want to rotate the cylinder and scale it so that it roughly matches the top of the leg, and then I'm basically going to make adjustments to reposition this. So, and I know that I'm actually going to use multiple cylinders here, so I'm going to actually make one for the pants, one for the legs, and one for the arm in the jacket. So I'm actually going to quickly just duplicate this cylinder. I'm scaling it uniformly so that I get relatively consistent shape. And then I'm going to drag another copy here for the leg. Okay. And so usually the best way to handle this stuff is to focus on the extremes first. So in this case, a good situation that I can be aware of is that I know I need to get the spot right where it transitions into the pelvis. So I'm going to kind of roughly just position this right there, knowing that I'm going to have to bridge it a bit up to do that. And I can, let's see, I can rotate this to roughly match the placement, and then I can, that makes it a little bit easier to adjust. But I do actually have to add in the divisions underneath afterwards. So I think I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to put this one at right around here because I don't want to get introduced too much distortion. I'm going to grab these verts here. I'm going to scale them uniformly for right now, but I'm going to be focusing on the idea of getting them roughly where they need to be and then positioning them and responding later. So I can right click, select faces. I can drag a box selecting all the faces, control select to deselect all the other faces. And then that way I can make an extrusion here, which I know will be the first part to helping me bridge the gap between the torso and the leg. So I'm just going to subtly try to place that so that it's fairly close to where the positioning is. I might also want to hold down the R key and select. So I have object scaling. I think that's fine. So I just want to make sure that it's kind of like loosely where I want that to be. Then I'm going to make sure I still have faces selected. I'm going to drag it here to grab the ones that are on the cap here. So you see those are the cap. Hold down the control key to deselect the edges that I don't want. And then I'm going to extrude this all the way down to the to basically the leg itself. And then basically I can go through and I can start adding some basic divisions here so that I can get more of the shape that I need. So like obviously I need to have something a little bit here. The main thing that I try to do to try to make sure that at a base level I'm trying to preserve the correct shape of segments of the body is that I try to scale them uniformly based on that cylinder that I initially created. So if I'm scaling them non-uniformly and say only scaling, like, say if I scaled just on the Z, or sorry, on the X-axis here, I would run into a position pretty quickly where I'd find that I have to make all the exact same edits on both sides of the model, whereas if I do this on this side and then I go to the next part and I realize, like, oh, I have to make some modifications or edits to it, I don't actually have to worry about that as much because I've still kept mostly the original shape intact. I just have to make the small specific revisions that are necessary for the context that I had. And so, like, there's some situations here where I'm dealing with clothes where obviously I'm going to have to deviate a little bit more than I would if it was not, like, bunched up clothing. But this works out reasonably well most of the time. So I'm going to go for, again, low density right now. And then when I'm done with this phase, I will come back around and make additional edits. So let's go ahead and look at this on this side now. Okay, so we got the leg here. Not too bad. So actually, yeah, oddly enough, this looks like this is really pretty close to what the shape needs to be. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab this stuff. I'm going to nudge that in here a little bit. Obviously, we've got the... we need to kind of rotate the pants leg, so it's roughly the shape of the... shape of the rotation of the ankle or knee. Sorry. It's been a long day. So, okay, so here we go. In this case, like, you know, so I am making more of the specific edits because I know that I got the rest of it pretty much where I wanted it from the front view. Okay, and so then if I look at that, okay, that's not too bad. We're on the right track. Let me go ahead and also I just want to make sure. So in the case where we're looking at the leg coming to meet the pant leg, I don't know that I will actually remove the cap here, but I know that I am going to actually remove the cap here because we're going to merge these pieces together, so I'm not going to want to have those polygons blocking. But then let's go ahead and let's work on the calf here. Shouldn't be too hard. We can go ahead and insert edge loop here. I didn't realize I was going to do that. Double click on this one and kind of scale those down so that they are roughly matching. So I'm going to make sure I stick the leg largely inside of the boot, and I'm actually going to bring it down to roughly around where the ankle is. And I'm going to select face. I'm going to grab all these faces, like all of the faces. Then I'm going to hold down Control, deselect the faces in the middle, hit Delete. That'll get rid of my faces on the top and the bottom. I'm going to go into my side view real quick. I'm going to make edits to this, because it looks like we can obviously we can rotate that a little bit. Looks like we can nudge this one this way a little bit, and I think that we can get this one probably with, we got one, probably around 2 additional edge loops. Again, I'm still rotating or still scaling them generally together. Now, in this case, we're definitely going to have to account for the fact that it needs to rotate with the bones, so I'm definitely going to want to have at least one more edge right around there. And actually, because we made it 6-sided with the idea that there's the flat flat face on the front and the back. That actually tends to work out pretty well for the shape of a leg, because there's a little bit more of like a flat section on the front where the actual bone is, or it's perceived to be a little bit flatter versus the circular bits on the sides. Okay, and so then we have the arm here. So let's go ahead and start. I'm gonna actually. I know that I'm going to leave the end faces on the bottom end, but I'm going to select this real quick, and then I'm going to hold down Control and drag a selection that encapsulates everything but the one at the far top. Then that way I know I can grab all these verts. I can scale them down uniformly until they match my wrist here. And actually, just so that you know, usually what I do with something like this is I will take then the vert in the middle, and I will pull it up so it looks like you can kind of see into the clothes, but there's not you don't have like an open section where you can actually see through the model or anything. So that way when the wrist on the hand goes through that, then you'll see a little bit of like the clothes wrapping around it. So okay, so now then the next bit here is pretty straightforward. I can just I can match this up with the elbow. Then I'm going to select edges, double click on this, shift and extrude. I'm going to rotate this so that it matches roughly the hemline of the shoulder. And this time I actually am intentionally scaling it mostly on 2 axes rather than all 3, because I know that this is going to be longer than longer up and down than it will be forward and backward. So and because in our particular template we don't actually have the arm on it in this case, I'm going to slide the arm back so that it roughly matches the position. Scale this out a little bit to match the shape of the arm hole. And then I know that before I do anything else, I want to make sure that I have a little bit of a bend in the elbow. So I'm going to pull the elbow back a bit, just so you can see that is there. Otherwise, if we had another side template that was basically just like the arm by itself, we could do that. But in this case, we don't, so that's totally fine. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm curious about this. Let's go ahead and put together each of the edge loops that we're going to need to add the rest of the basic contours. I know I need to add at least one edge roughly around here that I use to more tightly identify the shoulder. And I'm probably going to do one more in between that, because generally it doesn't hurt to have extra divisions around where these types of deformation points are. So that I then can make sure that this is fairly tightly fitting where these are supposed to go. And then one thing that's kind of neat is because you also, in addition to the insert edge loop tool, you also have the offset edge loop tool, and I'm going to open up the options here. I'm going to turn on insert with edge flow with this one as well, and then I can then enter tool and close. And what you can do is you can then click on an edge, and you can automatically apply 2 edge loops relative to that edge. So if I insert, I'm going to do equal distance from edge rather than relative distance from edge in this case, so that they roughly position themselves where they're supposed to be. Nope. In that case, sort of. And so those can be useful for certain bits. We can also let's just be mindful, because we know that we need to actually define the shape of the elbow a little bit. So I'm going to just grab these verts that we have on the back here. And make sure that they're slightly more tightly creating the impression of an elbow, just by sliding them out a bit on the back. Okay, I think that should be pretty good. Okay, so all right, so we've got the kind of basic body shapes here. So what we could do a few different things. I'm not super worried just yet about putting all the pieces together. We still have to make sure we have the actual shape of the jacket piece itself. We also have to make sure that we have the boots and all those pieces, and then we need the hands. Hands, again, probably going to be the hardest part. So we'll have to do these progressively one at a time. Again, I'm only focusing on one side, and then we'll convert them all over to the other side. So, all right. So let's actually go ahead and do the boots now, because I think that's probably going to be a relatively straightforward process. I'm going to do the same. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to do a cylindrical shape. I'm going to do a box shape. So I'm going to go ahead and create a box. And then basically what my goal is going to be here is to position this so that I can extrude parts of the box to make the foot in a natural way. So I'm going to assign existing material, character base mat. I know that I'm going to need to grab some of these verts. I'm going to start by just basically trying to position the foot in a way that generally makes sense. All right. Then I'm going to mesh tools, insert edge loop tool. I'm going to turn off, I already turned off insert with edge flow. Turn that off, make sure we do that. I'm going to quickly then extrude this part of the shoe. So shift extrude. And this is all really quick and dirty at the moment. So I'm going to insert edge loop. I'm going to add another edge loop here, add another edge loop here. Obviously, we need to position this so that these pieces are more consistent. So let's slide these verts around. Grab these. Grab these. Grab these and grab these. Right now it's still pretty square shaped, but we'll take care of that here in a bit. Then we probably want to add another subdivision going down the middle section here, so that we have a bit more control over the overall shape. And then basically what we're going to do, we want to also do a little bit of extruding. But actually, before we extrude that, let's try to actually contour this more to the shape of the shoe and the boot that we're intending. So I'm going to go ahead and grab these corner edges, and I'm going to scale them in on the x-axis, and then I'm going to slide them forward. One thing that's nice about shoes, you always want to get a little bit of like a little bit of an inset contour on the inside part of the shoe. I'm going to grab these two edges and these two edges. I'm going to scale these in and also push those in as well. And then I'm going to do the same thing with these edges. Actually, I think I can probably just slide them back. And then we can also grab like the whole set of edges going around this direction. We can kind of shift those down so that we get a little bit more of like an actual boot shape. Obviously, we're going to add more divisions into this to make this a little more smooth in a bit. But this gives us an initial kind of starting point. I'm actually going to go ahead and add another edge loop here because I think we need to make this a little softer, even though it doesn't quite look like it in the shape that we have here. Let's see. We can actually also go take this one, grab it, and pull it out. Okay. Then once we've got that, it's fairly straightforward to just extrude this up. So I can go ahead and grab each of these. I can extrude that out. Then I can scale that uniformly to match the shape, and then I can kind of rotate it. So it looks like in this case I'm going to have to get it roughly where it is here, and then also adjust it a bit here. This is one of those things that may not be 100% the same in both axes, so we just want to get it as close as we can. So, but what I'm also going to do at this one, like with the other one, is I'm going to go ahead and grab the with the arm. So I'm going to grab this vert in the middle here, and I'm going to slide it in and make sure it's roughly centered, so that it creates the impression of a bit of the boot extending outside of the leg without having any really obvious issues resulting from that. Okay, and so then we can go ahead and we can start making some additional tweaks here. So I can go ahead and add an edge loop, insert with edge flow. I'm going to add an edge loop here, an edge loop here. I'm going to add another edge loop here, an edge loop here. And in general, that's that way we're starting to deal with something that's a little bit more like the contour of an actual foot. And then if we wanted to, we could also select the modeling toolkit, quad draw. We could, actually I don't know that that's really doing exactly what I want. I got to be a little careful about how I utilize that. Just to like nudge the edges and the corners here, so we get this like a little more curvy, so it looks a little smoother and softer. And I'm not trying to do any crazy other details with this right now. Pretty much the main thing I'm doing here is just getting the overall shape of the boot, because we're going for kind of a low poly character design. I do want to make sure I have a little bit of like an uplift in the middle of the shoe. So we're not going to do anything too crazy here though, because overall it's a pretty low poly character, and I don't want to spend like a hugely long time on getting the boot just right. But okay, so we got a little bit of a bump here that we got to do. So let's go ahead and mesh tools, insert edge loop. Let's see. Okay, and that actually doesn't look too bad. We got to make sure that we tweak it a little bit on the front versus on the sides, because it looks like, in this case, it's actually a little more like it's kind of pinching that direction. Which looks all right. Nothing too bad. It's a little bit of like the roll in the leather or whatever it is that the boot is made out of. Okay. Okay, and then we can also add a couple of divisions here to make the shape have a tiny bit more, a little bit more contour to it. Do the same thing over here. Oop. Just want to make sure that this looks how we want it. And okay, so then that's not too bad. Too bad. I think we're doing okay there. All right, so I think that we're actually a little bit further ahead with the boot than we were with the other parts of the character. So let's go ahead and let's actually combine all these pieces. Well, no. Let's wrap up our hand and our jacket before we start merging everything together and creating the final integration of everything. So